The massive alien ships appeared at the edge of the solar system without warning, and their dark hulls blocked out the stars behind them as they moved toward Earth with terrible purpose. Commander Vexthor stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the small blue planet grow larger on his viewing screen, and he felt nothing but confidence, because this would be an easy conquest. His species had taken 47 worlds already, and this primitive planet would fall just as quickly as all the others had fallen before it. The reports his scouts had sent back were clear and simple. The humans had barely reached their own moon, and they possessed no real weapons that could threaten his fleet. They had no shields to protect their cities and no plasma cannons to fight back with. They were weak and small and helpless. Vexthor clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction and gave the order to begin broadcasting their message of surrender. Every screen on Earth suddenly showed the same alien face and the same translated words. The commander spoke with absolute certainty that humanity would submit within 1 day or face complete destruction. Resistance would be useless and compliance was their only choice. The message repeated across every television and every computer and every phone until the entire planet had heard the ultimatum. General Marcus. Blake stood in the Pentagon and watched the alien broadcast with cold fury building in his chest. Around him, officers from every nation scrambled to coordinate their response, while satellite images showed hundreds of enemy vessels surrounding their planet. President Helen Morrison appeared on the video screen and asked what options they had left. Marcus pulled up the tactical display and counted 372 hostile ships orbiting above them. The aliens had better technology and more firepower and every possible advantage, but they had made one critical mistake that would cost them everything. They thought humans were primitive and weak. They thought Earth would surrender without a fight. They had no idea what humanity became when someone threatened their home. The general spoke quietly, but his voice carried steel. They think we will roll over and die, but they are about to learn what happens when you corner a human being. Around the world, military forces began to move. In Moscow, General Dmitry Volkov coordinated with Admiral Liu Chen in Beijing. In London, Air Marshal Catherine Wright scrambled every fighter jet she had. Every nation and every soldier understood one simple truth. There would be no surrender today or any other day. Lieutenant Jake Morrison climbed into his fighter jet and ran through his pre-flight checklist with steady hands, even though his heart was pounding. Around him, hundreds of other pilots prepared to launch against an enemy they could not possibly defeat. His radio crackled and command spoke to all of them at once. "We know you are outmatched and we know they expect us to give up, but you need to show them what humanity is made of." Jake smiled grimly and responded with confidence. "Understood, Command. Let us give them hell." At the Space Center, Dr. Lisa Grant worked frantically with her team to find any weakness they could exploit. If conventional weapons would not be enough, then they needed to think differently. She pulled up schematics for every satellite and every piece of equipment humanity had ever launched into orbit. Her colleague, Dr. Paul Martinez, looked up from his computer and asked if she really wanted to turn their satellites into bombs. Lisa did not hesitate. "I want to turn everything we have into weapons because that is what humans do best." The alien fleet waited in orbit with complete confidence. They had given Earth 12 hours to respond, and so far they had only detected frantic communications and military movements. These were just the primitive displays of fear that Vexthor had seen on 47 other worlds. In 6 hours, he would demonstrate the power of his weapons by destroying one of their major cities as an example. London had been selected for destruction, but during those 6 critical hours something happened that the Zalcarians had never encountered before in all their conquests. Humanity did not panic or surrender or beg for mercy. Instead, they got angry and they got creative and they started turning everything they had into weapons of war. The counterattack began exactly at 4 in the morning. Modified missiles launched from 16 different locations across the planet and screamed toward space trailing fire behind them. The Zalcarians detected the launches immediately and watched with amusement as the primitive chemical rockets climbed slowly toward their fleet. Their point defense systems could eliminate these weapons without any effort at all, but the missiles were not the real threat. They were just a distraction. Captain Nicole Hayes sat in the cockpit of an experimental aircraft that officially did not exist. 6 other pilots flew beside her in identical craft. They had launched in the shadow of the missiles and flown below the alien sensor range. The payload she carried was simple but devastating. A bomb modified with experimental plasma charges that might disrupt the alien shields for just 1 microsecond. Nicole released her weapon and immediately pulled her aircraft into a brutal turn that crushed her into her seat. The bomb fell toward the nearest alien destroyer while she dove back toward the safety of the atmosphere. She had no idea if her weapon would work, but she had volunteered anyway because someone had to try. The first missile exploded harmlessly against the alien shields. The second and third met the same fate. The alien crews barely noticed. Then Nicole's bomb hit and the plasma charges detonated in a cascade of energy. For 1 critical microsecond, the destroyer's shields flickered and failed. 3 tungsten rods traveling at incredible speed punched through the gap and tore into the ship's hull. Atmosphere vented into space and secondary explosions rippled across the destroyer's surface. On the bridge of the flagship, Vexthor watched in shock as one of his vessels began to burn and list to one side. He demanded a damage report, but his officer could barely speak. The destroyer had suffered catastrophic damage and 70% of its crew was dead or dying. Vexthor could not believe what he was seeing. How had these primitive weapons wounded his ship? It was impossible. But General Blake was not finished. At bases across the planet, missiles launched in coordinated waves. From submarines in the ocean, more missiles broke the surface. The sky became a storm of fire and metal. The Zalkarian fleet activated all their defenses and destroyed dozens of incoming missiles. But for every missile they destroyed, 3 more slipped through the gaps. Each one carried a payload designed to exploit that 1 microsecond vulnerability. 3 more destroyers took critical damage. 1 frigate suffered a direct hit to its reactor and exploded like a miniature sun. The aliens finally understood that these humans were not going to surrender. They were going to fight. Vexthor slammed his appendage against his command throne and ordered his weapons officer to target the largest human city. A beam of superheated plasma lanced down from the flagship aimed directly at London. The beam would vaporize millions of humans and teach them the cost of resistance. But the beam never reached the ground. At bases across Europe, massive electromagnetic projectors activated and created overlapping fields above the city. The technology was experimental and untested and likely to fail, but it was all they had. The plasma beam hit the electromagnetic barrier and dispersed like water hitting glass. Buildings below superheated, and windows shattered and fires erupted across 3 city blocks, but London survived. Squadron leader James Bennett coordinated the European response from his command center and watched the defense grid hold at 40% capacity. He reported to General Blake that they could not take another hit like that one. Blake's voice came through clear and determined. "You will not have to, because Phase 2 starts now." In orbit, the Zalkarian fleet attempted to understand how these primitives had wounded them so badly. They had superior technology and firepower and numbers, but they did not understand human warfare. They did not know that humans had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other efficiently. Every weapon and tactic and brutal lesson learned from countless wars was now being used against them. Lieutenant Jake Morrison flew his fighter through the debris field of destroyed missiles and aimed toward the alien vessel above. He knew his aircraft could not survive in orbit and could not penetrate their shields and could not possibly make a difference. He did not care anymore. He had volunteered for this mission, knowing it was suicide. "This is Sierra 47 and I am going in." Command ordered him to stand down because he did not have the right payload. Jake smiled and responded, "Then I will be the payload." He angled his nose toward the nearest frigate and pushed his engines past their limits. Behind him, 20 other pilots followed his lead. They were volunteers who understood the mission perfectly. They were going to die, but their deaths would mean something. The Zalkarians detected the incoming fighters but dismissed them as insignificant. What could small aircraft possibly do against starships? They learned the answer when 20 fighters traveling at maximum speed impacted their shields at the exact same moment. The explosions were not powerful enough to breach the shields, but they created interference patterns and disruptions. Dr. Lisa Grant had calculated those patterns with precision. She shouted from her command center, "Now and hit them now." From the space station, every solar panel redirected its energy into a single focused beam. Communication satellites added their power, and GPS systems contributed everything they had. The combined electromagnetic pulse struck the alien frigate at the exact moment the fighters exploded. The shields collapsed completely. The hull breached in multiple places. The frigate broke apart and tumbled toward Earth's atmosphere where it would burn up like a meteor. Vexthor watched another ship die and finally understood the terrible truth. These were not primitives at all. These were warriors who had been fighting and killing for their entire history. They were far more dangerous than he had imagined possible. The battle raged for 6 hours and Earth's orbit became a graveyard of twisted metal and burning debris. 8 Zalcarian vessels had been destroyed or crippled, but the cost to humanity was terrible. Every major city reported casualties. Military bases lay in smoking ruins. Entire squadrons had been wiped out in seconds. But humanity was not retreating or surrendering. They were adapting and learning and getting stronger. Colonel Wei Jiang coordinated with remaining forces from what was left of Beijing's command center. His screen showed tactical data streaming from every battlefield across the planet. The Americans were reporting success with electromagnetic pulse strategies. The Russians had modified nuclear missiles to detonate above the fleet and create radiation clouds that interfered with alien targeting systems. Studied the holographic display showing the new Zalcarian formation. They had pulled back to higher orbit and regrouped their vessels. They were learning too and adapting their tactics. They will figure out our countermeasures soon, and we need something they will not expect. General Blake was thinking the same thing. He watched satellite feeds showing the alien fleet's new defensive posture. They had created overlapping shield networks and positioned their vessels for mutual support. Any conventional attack would be suicide now. Then he received a communication from Captain Danny Rogers on a submarine in the Arctic Ocean. Rogers explained his idea quickly. The aliens had adapted to every attack from below and from orbit. But they were thinking in 2 dimensions only. They were watching the surface and the orbital platforms but not the outer solar system. Humanity had assets out there that the aliens did not know about. Blake's eyes widened with understanding. The deep space probes, Rogers confirmed. Voyager and New Horizons and every probe we ever launched. They are primitive by alien standards, but they are already moving at high velocity. With the right course corrections, we can turn them into kinetic weapons. Blake asked how long it would take. Rogers admitted it would take days for the probes to reach the fleet even at maximum speed. Humanity needed to survive long enough for them to arrive. Blake looked at casualty reports showing millions dead and infrastructure collapsing. Could they hold out for days? He thought about Lieutenant Morrison and the pilots who had sacrificed everything. He thought about civilians forming militias to defend their cities. He thought about scientists like Dr. Grant who had not slept in 2 days. We will make it work and send me those calculations. Above Earth, Vexthor received his own troubling report from the High Command. They were demanding results immediately. The message was clear. Complete the conquest within 1 day or face execution for failure. Vexthor ground his mandibles together in frustration. He had lost 16 vessels and 3,000 crew members. These humans continued fighting with a ferocity he had never seen. He made a decision that would change everything. Prepare the Nova Lance. His tactical officer turned in shock. The Nova Lance was forbidden for use on inhabited worlds. The antimatter beam would crack continents and render the planet uninhabitable for generations. Vexthor did not care anymore. These primitives have left us no choice, and if we cannot conquer them, then we will make an example of them. But humanity had one more card to play. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell sat in the cockpit of humanity's first faster-than-light spacecraft. The experimental drive had a 30% chance of working and a 50% chance of exploding on ignition. Sarah had volunteered anyway because her daughter lived in Tokyo. And if that antimatter weapon fired, her daughter would die. Dr. Grant's voice came through her headset. Sarah, you do not have to do this, and we can find another way. Sarah checked her instruments one final time. There is no other way, Lisa, and someone has to stop that weapon before it fires. The experimental drive engaged and reality bent around her ship. 3 seconds later, she emerged 200 kilometers from the flagship. Alarm screamed as her hull temperature became critical, and radiation levels reached lethal doses. She had 90 seconds before her body shut down. She armed every weapon and fired everything at the massive energy signature of the charging Nova Lance. The Wraith slammed into the flagship at a fraction of light speed. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface like a new star in the night sky. Commander Vexthor died instantly along with 4,000 crew members. The flagship broke in half, and secondary explosions rippled through both sections. The Zalcarian fleet scattered in confusion as their command ship died. General Blake watched the explosion and allowed himself one moment of grief for Sarah Mitchell. Then he returned to his displays and gave the order. All units press the attack and give them no quarter, and show them what happens when they threaten our home. The destruction of the flagship shattered the Zalkarian command structure completely. Their remaining vessels suddenly had no leader and no clear orders. Some ships maintained formation and prepared for coordinated response. Others pulled back to higher orbit seeking safety. A few attempted to flee the system entirely. None of them would make it out alive. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, autonomous mining drones had been silently harvesting resources for decades. Dr. Grant's team uploaded new programming to them hours ago. The Zalkarians had not bothered to monitor the outer system closely because they assumed nothing out there could threaten them. They were wrong about that too. The mining drones activated their engines and began accelerating toward Earth. Each one carried tons of refined metal ore. They were not sophisticated weapons at all. They were barely more than cargo containers with engines attached. But sophistication was not required. They just needed to be fast, and there were hundreds of them. Sub-Commander Ralvik commanded the battlecruiser Crimson Talon now that Vexthor was dead. He watched his sensors detect objects moving from the asteroid belt on intercept courses. His tactical officer flagged them as anomalies moving under power. Ralvik pulled up the data. The objects were primitive metal containers with simple engines, but there were so many of them and they were moving incredibly fast. He gave orders to destroy the incoming objects before they reached his lines. The fleet opened fire with plasma beams and particle cannons. They destroyed dozens and then hundreds of mining drones. But the drones had launched from multiple directions, and for every one destroyed, two more slipped through the defensive fire. The first drone hit a frigate and punched through its weakened shields. The impact alone did not destroy the vessel, but it cracked the armor and exposed internal compartments to vacuum. The second and third drones followed seconds later, hitting the same frigate. The ship's spine snapped and it broke apart completely. Across the Zalkarian formation, mining drones impacted shields and hulls with the force of nuclear weapons. Point defenses were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Ships that had survived the initial assault found themselves crippled by glorified cargo containers. Ralvik muttered in disbelief. They are using mining equipment as weapons, and what kind of species does this? His officer reported 23 vessels destroyed, and 41 more with critical damage. The humans were not stopping. They were throwing everything at the fleet. Ralvik finally understood. This was not a military engagement. This was total war. Every resource and tool and piece of technology was being converted into weapons. They had turned satellites into bombs and aircraft into missiles and mining drones into kinetic projectiles. Then the moon itself became a weapon. On the lunar surface, nuclear charges detonated in a carefully planned sequence. Construction crews had placed them over 3 days while working in spacesuits as the battle raged overhead. The explosions were shaped and directional. They launched massive chunks of lunar rock toward the Zalkarian fleet. It was insane and desperate and magnificently human. Boulders the size of buildings tumbled through space on ballistic trajectories. They were not guided or precise, but there were so many that precision did not matter at all. The fleet scattered as ships broke formation to avoid the incoming debris. Their defensive coordination collapsed. Their overlapping shields separated. In that moment of chaos, humanity struck with everything they had left. Every remaining aircraft and missile and weapon system launched simultaneously. From submarines, ballistic missiles roared toward space. From underground bunkers, railgun projectiles shot into orbit. From the space station, the skeleton crew fired emergency thrusters to send the entire structure on a collision course with the nearest battlecruiser. Captain Frank Lloyd broadcast from the station. "All personnel, this is Captain Lloyd on the space station, and we are set for collision. We are evacuating in the last pod. It has been an honor." The station tumbled through the void, catching sunlight one final time before it smashed into the battlecruiser. The impact sheared off the ship's forward section and sent it spiraling into Earth's atmosphere, where it burned up like a shooting star. Sub-Commander Ralvik watched his fleet disintegrate. More than half the vessels were destroyed or disabled. The rest were scattered and disorganized, fighting individual battles against an enemy with unlimited weapons and absolutely no fear. He made the only logical decision: send a transmission to High Command. "We are evacuating Earth space. This conquest has failed." His officer hesitated. "Sir, the High Command will execute us for failure." Ralvik knew that, but he preferred execution to dying here. "Then we die by their hand rather than these humans. Prepare to jump to hyperspace." General Blake had anticipated this moment. He knew eventually the aliens would try to flee. Humanity had prepared one final surprise. Around the world, every space agency had contributed equipment. Every damaged rocket and old satellite and piece of space hardware formed a loose network around Earth's gravity well. They could not physically stop the aliens, but they could do something more important. When the Zalkarian ships engaged hyperspace drives, the network activated. Every transmitter and communication array sent out the same signal on the exact frequency the aliens used for faster-than-light travel. The interference was not enough to stop the jump, but it destabilized the calculations and threw off the coordinates. 11 vessels attempted to flee. 6 exploded as their drives overloaded from the interference. 3 emerged from hyperspace inside the sun, where they vaporized instantly. The remaining 2 appeared in deep space, thousands of light years from any destination. Their navigation systems were completely fried. They would drift until life support failed. Ralvik's battlecruiser never got the chance to jump. A modified missile detonated near his bridge. The electromagnetic pulse fried every system on the ship. Life support and weapons and shields and engines all went dark. The battlecruiser went silent and cold, drifting in orbit, as the crew scrambled with emergency systems. The battle for Earth was over. Of 372 Zalkarian vessels that arrived, none remained operational. Humanity had paid a terrible price with millions dead and cities in ruins. But they had won against impossible odds. In the Pentagon, General Blake watched the last alien signal disappear from his displays. Around him, exhausted officers sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what they had accomplished. President Morrison appeared on the screen with tears on her face. "General, I am receiving reports from around the world. The alien fleet is destroyed. We actually won." Blake nodded slowly. He was too tired to smile. "Yes, Madam President, we won." "Now comes the harder part." Morrison asked what that was. Blake answered quietly. "Making sure they never underestimate us again." 3 weeks after the battle, Earth began to rebuild. The wounded received treatment and the dead were honored. Survivors started putting their world back together. Construction crews cleared rubble and engineers restored power. But one question remained in everyone's mind. Would the Zalkarians return with a larger fleet? Dr. Lisa Grant stood in the new Orbital Defense Command Center watching technicians work on salvaged alien technology. They had recovered intact systems from crashed ships, shield generators and plasma weapons and faster-than-light drives. Humanity now possessed technology that would advance their development by centuries. She spoke quietly to General Blake. "It is not enough." Blake raised an eyebrow. "We have alien technology and a united defense force and the world working together. What more do we need?" Lisa responded. "We need them to be afraid of us. We won through desperation and luck. If they return with actual military tactics, we might not survive." Blake was quiet, then nodded. "What do you suggest?" Lisa pulled up a display showing wreckage orbiting Earth. "We salvaged a communication system from the flagship. It is still connected to their network. I think we should send them a message that makes sure they never want to come back." 2 days later, the message was ready, and it was not a diplomatic statement or a threat from Earth's leaders. It was something far more effective. A recording that would be broadcast across the entire Zalkarian communication network. The transmission began with footage from the battle, showing Earth's primitive missiles going up against advanced alien warships. It showed the destruction of the first destroyer and shields collapsing under coordinated attacks. It showed the desperate defense of London when the plasma beam struck. But it also showed what came after. Mining drones converted into weapons. The moon used as a cannon. The space station deliberately crashed into an enemy vessel. Pilots flying aircraft into alien ships without hesitation. Throughout the footage, a voiceover played. Captain Danny Rogers had written the script, and President Morrison recorded it herself. Her voice was calm and measured and absolutely terrifying. "You came to Earth believing we were primitive. You were correct. We have no energy shields or plasma weapons. We have barely left our own planet. But you made one fatal error. The footage showed the flagship exploding as Sarah Mitchell sacrificed herself. You assumed primitive meant weak. You forgot that humanity has spent 10,000 years perfecting one skill above all others: war." The recording showed the lunar bombardment and submarines launching missiles and civilians helping build defenses. "We are a species that weaponizes everything we touch. Our satellites and space stations and even our moon. We fly aircraft into your ships. We hack your communications. We turn your physics against you. And we do this while you have every advantage. The footage showed burning Zalcarian ships falling through the atmosphere and crews abandoning vessels. You wanted to conquer us. Instead, you gave us your technology. You taught us your weaknesses. You showed us you can be defeated. And you united every human on this planet against you. The final shot showed Earth itself scarred but intact, with new defensive platforms under construction. We broadcast this across your empire so every world and ship and soldier understands one truth. Earth is not for conquering. Humanity does not surrender. If you return, we will not just defend ourselves. We will take the fight to you. President Morrison paused. You have been warned. Stay away from Earth. The transmission ended with coordinates showing the 3 ships that had emerged in deep space. Their distress signals had broadcast for weeks. Humanity had known about them the entire time. They chose to let them suffer as a message. We can find you. We can hear you. And we can leave you to die. In the throne room, Emperor Thaxcor watched the recording in silence. Around him, military advisors shifted uncomfortably. They expected footage of a conquered world and primitive beings submitting. Instead, they watched 300 ships be destroyed by a species that should have been helpless. The Emperor demanded analysis. His chief strategist stepped forward carefully. Your Magnificence, the humans used tactics we have never encountered. They exploited their limitations as advantages. They demonstrated willingness to sacrifice themselves. Most concerning, they adapted faster than our forces could adjust. Emperor Thaxcor asked if they could conquer Earth with a larger fleet. The strategist hesitated. Possibly, Your Magnificence, but the cost would be enormous. They now possess our technology. Within 5 cycles, they may have ships of their own built with human creativity. They could become a peer military power. The Emperor studied the frozen image of Earth on his display, a small blue world on the edge of an unremarkable spiral arm. He had authorized its conquest without thought, never imagining primitives could threaten the Empire. How many worlds have we conquered? 47, Your Magnificence. How many fought back like this? The strategist's mandibles drooped. None, Your Magnificence. Emperor Thaxcor made his decision. Issue a standing order. No vessel enters Earth's system for any reason. Mark it as forbidden. Any captain violating this order will be executed. Your Magnificence, we have never retreated from conquest. We are not retreating. We choose not to waste resources on a species that costs more to conquer than they are worth. Let them keep their world. The Empire is vast enough, but everyone understood the truth. The Empire was afraid of a primitive species for the first time in 1,000 cycles. That fear would spread throughout the galaxy. On Earth, General Blake watched decoded Zalcarian communications with satisfaction. They are declaring us forbidden. No ships approach Earth. President Morrison smiled. Dr. Grant's message worked. Blake shook his head. It was not just the message. It was the battle itself. We showed them humanity does not just defend. We attack, we innovate. We turn every disadvantage into weapons. They avoid us because we scared them. Lisa joined via video link with her team visible behind her. We scared them with primitive weapons. What happens when we have ships built from their technology? When we arrive at their worlds? Blake and Morrison exchanged glances. The same thought occurred to both. For 10,000 years, humanity had been confined to one planet, dreaming of stars but unable to reach them. The Zalcarians gave them something valuable. Knowledge that humanity could compete. That human determination could overcome impossible odds. Morrison spoke firmly. We rebuild. We study every piece of alien technology and improve it. We unite every nation under one goal, reaching the stars. And when we get there, we make sure no one thinks humans are primitive again. Blake finished her thought. We make sure they remember what happened here. Across the planet, that sentiment echoed everywhere. In laboratories, scientists reverse-engineered alien systems. In shipyards, engineers designed human starships combining Zalcarian technology with human innovation. In academies, commanders studied battle recordings, learning lessons that would be taught for generations. Lieutenant Jake Morrison received the Medal of Honor posthumously, along with 200 other pilots. Captain Sarah Mitchell became a legend as the first human to break light speed and the woman who saved billions. Dr. Grant became director of United Earth Space Command Research Division, but the greatest memorial came from an unlikely source. In the flagship wreckage, salvage crews found Commander Vexthor's personal logs. His final entry, recorded minutes before Sarah's attack, contained one line that would be quoted in every history book. "These humans do not fight like any species we encountered. They do not seek survival. They seek victory, and they will pay any price to achieve it." 5 years later, the EDS Defiance launched from Earth orbit as humanity's first faster-than-light warship. It was followed by EDS Courage and EDS Liberty and 12 others. The fleet did not head toward Zalcarian space. Humanity was not ready for that confrontation yet. Instead, they headed toward unexplored stars carrying a simple message. Humanity was no longer confined to Earth. They were explorers and traders and warriors and builders. They would find new worlds and make new allies, and if necessary, fight new enemies. The galaxy would learn what the Zalcarians discovered the hard way. Never underestimate humanity. Never threaten their home. And never assume primitive means weak. Because humans do not just survive. They adapt. They overcome. And they make sure anyone threatening them regrets it. The age of humanity among the stars had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The human fleet moved through space at speeds that would have been impossible just 5 years earlier, and aboard the EDS Defiance, Captain Greg Turner watched the stars stream past his viewing screen. His crew of 200 represented the best of humanity from every nation and background. They were scientists and soldiers and engineers, all working together with one purpose: to show the galaxy that Earth was no longer alone. Behind the Defiance, 11 other warships followed in tight formation. Each one was a masterpiece of combined technology, using salvaged Zalcarian systems improved by human innovation. The shields were stronger. The weapons were more accurate. The engines were faster. Humanity had taken what they captured and made it better, because that was what humans did. On Earth, the rebuilding continued at an incredible pace. Cities that had been destroyed were rising again with new defensive systems built into every structure. Orbital platforms surrounded the planet in layers, providing protection that would make any future invasion impossible. The lunar surface now hosted weapon emplacements and shield generators. Mars had 3 new colonies already, with more planned. But the greatest change was not in technology or weapons. It was in unity. Every nation on Earth had joined the United Earth Defense Force. Old conflicts and rivalries had been set aside because humanity finally understood they were all on the same side. They had seen what happened when they worked together, and no one wanted to go back to the old divisions. Dr. Lisa Grant stood in her laboratory examining a piece of alien technology that still puzzled her team. The Zalcarians had used quantum entanglement for instantaneous communication across vast distances. Humanity was close to replicating it, but something was missing. Her assistant, Dr. Karen Walsh, suggested they were approaching the problem wrong. Lisa looked up from her workstation. "What do you mean?" Karen pulled up a hologram showing the alien device structure. "The Zalcarians built this for their biology and their thinking patterns. We are trying to copy it exactly. What if we redesigned it to work with human neural patterns instead?" Lisa smiled slowly. That was exactly the kind of thinking that had won the battle. Do not copy, adapt, improve, make it human. Show me your design. 3 hours later, they had a working prototype. It was smaller than the alien version and required less power. Within a week, every human ship would have instantaneous communication with Earth, no matter how far they traveled. The Zalcarians had given humanity a gift without realizing it. They had shown that humans were not just good at warfare. They were good at taking any technology and making it better. Captain Turner received a priority transmission from Earth. General Blake appeared on his screen, looking older, but still strong. "Captain, we have detected something at the edge of your patrol route. A distress signal on an unknown frequency." Turner pulled up his sensor data. "I see it, General." "Should we investigate?" Blake nodded. "Carefully. We do not know if this is another hostile species or if it is a trap, but if someone needs help, we should at least check." The fleet changed course and moved toward the signal. As they got closer, Turner's sensors showed a small vessel drifting without power. It was not Zalcarian design. The hull configuration was completely different. "General, I think we found someone new." Blake's expression became serious. "Remember, Captain, this is first contact. How we handle this will determine how other species see humanity. Show them who we are." Turner understood. He ordered his crew to battle stations but kept weapons powered down. The Defiance approached the drifting vessel slowly. Scans showed 2 life signs aboard. The ship had suffered damage from what looked like weapons fire. Someone had attacked them. Lieutenant Susan Brooks reported from the sensor station. Captain, the vessel is venting atmosphere. Those life signs will not last long. Turner made his decision. Launch a rescue team. Get them aboard before they die. 10 minutes later, 2 aliens were brought aboard the Defiance. They were not like the Zalcarians at all. They stood upright on 2 legs like humans, but their skin was scaled and their eyes were larger. The medical team worked quickly to stabilize them. Dr. Rachel Stone reported they would survive. When the aliens regained consciousness, they were terrified. They had expected death or slavery. Instead, they found themselves in a clean medical bay with humans trying to help them. Through careful use of translation programs, the humans learned their story. The 2 aliens were merchants named Krell and Vesa. They had been traveling through this sector when Zalcarian pirates attacked them. The Empire was large and not all of its ships followed orders. Some vessels had gone rogue and preyed on weaker species. Krell and Vesa had barely escaped with their lives. Captain Turner listened to their story and felt anger building. The Zalcarians were still out here terrorizing innocent people. Where did these pirates go? Krell seemed surprised by the question. You want to chase them? They have a warship. Your vessel is impressive, but you cannot fight them alone. Turner smiled without humor. You do not know what humans can do. 6 hours later, the Defiance found the pirate ship raiding another merchant vessel. Turner opened a communication channel. Zalcarian vessel, this is Captain Greg Turner of the United Earth Defense Force. You will power down your weapons and surrender immediately. The pirate captain appeared on screen laughing. Humans, I heard about Earth. You got lucky once against an overconfident fleet. Try your luck against me and see what happens. Turner cut the channel and looked at his weapons officer, Lieutenant Jack Phillips. Show them we did not get lucky. The Defiance opened fire with precision the Zalcarians had never seen. Human targeting systems locked onto the pirate ship's weapons and disabled them in 3 shots. Their shields collapsed under focused electromagnetic pulses. Their engines went offline when a railgun round punched through their aft section. The entire engagement lasted 40 seconds. Turner opened the channel again. You were saying something about luck? The pirate captain stared in shock. That is impossible. How did you do that? We learned from the best teachers, you. Now surrender or we will disable your life support next. The pirates surrendered. Turner's crew boarded the vessel and freed 6 other aliens who had been captured. Word of the rescue spread quickly through the merchant networks. Within a week, ships from a dozen species were requesting human escorts through dangerous space. Within a month, a formal alliance was proposed. On Earth, President Morrison met with the first alien ambassadors to visit the planet. They came in peace, seeking trade and friendship. They had heard about the battle with the Zalcarian fleet. They knew humanity was strong. But more importantly, they knew humanity was willing to help those who could not defend themselves. Ambassador Trell from the Vaccine Consortium spoke for the group. We have watched the Zalcarian Empire expand for generations. They conquer and enslave. We are too weak individually to stop them. But together with humanity, perhaps we can build something better. Morrison smiled and extended her hand. We are not interested in building an empire, ambassador. But we are very interested in building friendships and making sure no one else suffers what Earth suffered. The alliance grew quickly. Within 2 years, 20 species had joined. They called themselves the Free Worlds Coalition. They shared technology and resources. They defended each other against pirates and raiders. And at the center of it all was humanity providing military training and defensive technology. The Zalcarian Empire watched this development with growing concern. Emperor Thaxcor received reports showing human ships operating throughout the sector. They were not conquering or enslaving. They were building alliances and helping weaker species resist Zalcarian expansion. His advisors warned that this coalition could become a real threat. Thaxcor remembered the footage from Earth. He remembered 300 ships destroyed. He made another decision. Send a message to the human leaders. Propose a non-aggression treaty. Establish neutral zones. We will not expand toward their space if they do not expand toward ours. His advisors were shocked. Your Magnificence, we have never negotiated with primitives. They are not primitives anymore. They are a peer power, and more importantly, they are dangerous. I would rather have peace with them than another battle. The treaty was signed 6 months later. Humanity and the Zalcarian Empire established borders and agreed not to interfere in each other's territory. It was not friendship. It was pragmatic acknowledgement that neither side wanted another war. But the treaty did not stop humanity from growing. More ships launched from Earth every month. More colonies spread across suitable worlds. The Free Worlds Coalition expanded. Human technology improved. Within 10 years, humanity had become one of the major powers in the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Grant retired from active research but continued teaching the next generation. She often told her students the same story. We won not because we had better technology or superior weapons. We won because we refused to give up. Remember that lesson. Humanity succeeds through determination and creativity, and willingness to try what others think is impossible. General Blake retired as well, but his legacy lived on. The defense force he built protected not just Earth but dozens of allied worlds. His tactics were studied in military academies across the galaxy. Future generations of officers learned one simple truth: never underestimate an enemy.